Richard Foster ended the call, slipped his phone back into his pocket, and quietly walked out of the office without realizing his daughter was hiding only a few feet away. Emily remained frozen behind the desk until the sound of his footsteps disappeared down the hallway. Her entire body was shaking. She could barely breathe as she looked down at the photograph in her hands. The father she had trusted all her life had just ordered someone to find Ethan before the FBI could protect him. At that moment, every lie, every unanswered question, and every painful memory suddenly began fitting together. Ethan had never abandoned her. He had been trying to protect her all along. Fighting back tears, Emily carefully placed the photograph inside her purse, took several pictures of the documents with her phone, and quietly slipped out of the office before anyone noticed she had been there. She didn't sleep that night. Instead, she drove through the empty streets of New York with only one thought in her mind. She had to find Ethan before her father's men did. Meanwhile, inside the federal prison, Ethan was being transferred to a secure facility after prosecutors decided his life was in danger. 2 FBI agents escorted him through a private underground exit while reminding him not to trust anyone until the investigation was complete. As their vehicle entered the highway, a black SUV suddenly appeared behind them, matching every turn they made. One of the agents immediately noticed the suspicious vehicle and reached for his radio. Seconds later, another SUV blocked the road ahead. Tires screamed across the pavement as the FBI driver slammed on the brakes. Without warning, masked gunmen stepped out and opened fire. The quiet highway exploded into chaos. Glass shattered, engines roared, and bullets ripped through the armored vehicle. The agents returned fire while shouting for Ethan to stay down. He covered his head as the vehicle spun across the wet road before crashing into the guardrail. Smoke filled the air. One agent managed to push Ethan through the rear door, yelling, "Run! Don't stop!" Ethan sprinted into the nearby woods without looking back. Behind him, gunshots echoed through the darkness as flashing police lights slowly approached from the distance. After running for nearly 20 minutes, exhausted and covered in mud, Ethan collapsed beside an abandoned cabin deep inside the forest. He had escaped, but he had no phone, no money, and no idea who was still hunting him. At that exact moment, Emily arrived at the FBI field office, carrying the photograph and copies of the documents she had secretly taken from her father's office. The agents listened carefully as she explained everything she had overheard. Their expressions changed immediately. One investigator quietly admitted they had just lost contact with the transport team carrying Ethan. Emily's face turned pale. "Is he alive?" she asked. The room fell completely silent. No one answered. Then, an emergency radio suddenly came to life. "Transport vehicle attacked. Multiple suspects. Ethan Carter, missing." Emily closed her eyes as tears rolled down her face. She whispered the same words she had spoken years earlier in Central Park. "Please, just let him be alive." Unknown to everyone, Ethan wasn't alone in the forest anymore. From the shadows of the abandoned cabin, an old man slowly stepped forward, looked directly at Ethan, and quietly said, "I've been waiting 7 years to meet you, because I know who really killed your father."
Ethan stared at the document for what felt like an eternity. His heartbeat became louder with every passing second as his eyes remained locked on the signature at the bottom of the page. Richard Foster, the father of the woman he had loved more than his own life. It didn't make sense. Richard Foster was one of the most respected businessmen in America, a man who appeared on television talking about honesty, charity, and leadership. How could someone like him possibly be connected to Victor Hale's criminal empire? Ethan looked up at his attorney, convinced there had to be some mistake, but the expression on the lawyer's face said otherwise. "We verified the documents 3 different times," the attorney said quietly. "Victor Hale's shell companies received financial support from one of Richard Foster's private investment firms. We still don't know whether he was running the operation or simply helping to hide the money, but we know he was involved." Ethan's entire world turned upside down. For years he had blamed Victor Hale for destroying his life, but now he realized someone even more powerful had been standing behind the curtain all along. The worst part wasn't the betrayal. The worst part was knowing Emily had been living under the same roof as the man who might have ruined both of their lives. At that very moment, Emily was sitting inside her father's office after the charity event. Richard noticed she seemed distracted and asked if something was bothering her. Emily hesitated before finally asking the question that had been haunting her for days. "Dad, do you remember Victor Hale?" For the first time in years, Richard Foster's calm expression changed. It lasted only a second, but Emily noticed it immediately. He forced a smile and replied that Victor had once been a businessman who disappeared after a financial scandal years ago. Then he quickly changed the subject, asking Emily about her upcoming engagement party. She nodded politely, but deep inside, she knew her father was hiding something. That night, unable to ignore her instincts any longer, Emily secretly entered Richard's private home office while he was asleep. She searched through filing cabinets, desk drawers, and locked shelves until she discovered an old metal box hidden behind a bookshelf. Inside were dozens of business contracts, photographs, and handwritten notes dating back nearly 10 years. As she flipped through the papers, one photograph made her blood run cold. It showed Richard Foster and Victor Hale shaking hands outside a luxury hotel only weeks before Ethan had been arrested. Emily's hands began trembling. Her father had lied to her. Before she could examine the rest of the documents, she suddenly heard footsteps approaching the office door. Someone had realized she wasn't in her room. She quickly hid behind the desk, clutching the photograph against her chest as the office door slowly opened. Richard walked inside, switched on the lights, and quietly looked around the room. For several terrifying seconds, complete silence filled the office. Then he softly said, almost as if speaking to himself, "I knew this day would come eventually." Emily held her breath, praying he wouldn't discover she was only a few feet away. But what Richard said next shocked her even more. He pulled out his phone, made a call, and whispered, "Find Ethan Carter before the FBI reaches him. This time, don't let him survive."